guys in the dark.
Hello, my name is Precious. This story takes place when I was about 10 years old. I'm 15 now. The sun was about to set, and I was impatient to try out my new bike that I had gotten for Easter that day. I begged my mom to let me ride my bike down the street and then come back. This is important to the story. Here's a picture of the street that I lived on. The red dot is my house. The blue dot is my friend's house. The green line is where I rode my bike. The brown line is where the car drove till this point. The pink square is where the car had stopped, and the yellow square was where I was at the time. I rode my bike as normal, making sure that the seat was adjusted just right, and that the handles and pedals felt right. Feeling the warm breeze blow against my face, not knowing what I was about to get myself into. I slowed my speed as I turned the corner, while coming across a pink PT Cruiser car coming my way. The car stopped abruptly, just a few yards in front of me. I had never seen a pink car like that before in person, so I was taking a very good look at the car. I slowed down a lot, looking past myself to see why that car had pulled over. Soon after the car had stopped, I saw a lady around 30 or 40 years old, who was probably about 200 to 280 pounds, with brown hair and tan skin getting out of the passenger seat. She started to walk towards me in a rush. I wasn't sure what was happening, so I had waited about 5 seconds until I saw the driver. A very similar lady getting out and opening up the car's trunk. It then clicked in my head what exactly was going to happen. Having a mother who had been obsessed with true crime shows, I knew at that moment that those two ladies were trying to kidnap me. Maybe I was a little overdramatic, but I was around 10 or 11 years old at the time, and getting kidnapped was one of my biggest fears. I got up from my bike seat, throwing my bike on the concrete. I ran so fast to the front door of my friends Joel and Rose's house, which was the house that I was going to turn around at. I basically teleported to their front door, banging on the door as much as I could. There was a car in the driveway, so I knew that there would be somebody home to help me. I did know that their grandmother was always home. I looked back at the car, and I saw the lady that was in the passenger seat, the one who was walking towards me, turn around, speeding back to the car. The other lady, who was at the trunk getting out a large black trash bag, had shut the trunk and got back into the car. I didn't stop banging on their door. About a minute had passed by, and nobody came to let me in. They had a small oval window on their door, which I could see into, but nobody had came. I was knocking on the door for what felt like 80 minutes, and nobody had came. The one day that I needed somebody to be home the most, nobody was home. I then heard a car driving by slowly from out of sight. I didn't want to take any chances, so I hid myself in the corner of my friend's porch, which was fenced off. I waited for about 2 minutes for the coast to be clear. For some more background information, I had a fence all around my house. I had a gate on one side of my house leading to my front yard. I also had a gate in the back corner of my fence, which was connected to Joel and Rose's backyard, which we were very close to. We got the gate, so we could hang out any time we wanted. I took my bike from the sidewalk, and then I ran through my friend's backyard. I opened up the gate, walked through my backyard, sobbing at this point. I was trying to wrap my head around what had just happened. As I was opening up the gate to the front yard, I felt a weird shadow above me, as if they were back. I looked up, and I saw the same car pass by my house. I ducked down, and I started to cry even more. I ran into my garage. I threw my bike down, and then I shut my garage door. I walked into my house. My mother was sitting on the couch in the living room as I had walked in. She noticed that I was crying and asked me what was wrong in that motherly tone. I told her that I had fallen. I tried to lie so that my mother wouldn't know what was going on. I was just too scared to tell her the truth about almost being abducted. I moved on with my life after that. I would think about it from time to time, as I happened to pass by Joel and Rose's house, but it never stayed on my mind for very long. But to those two ladies who tried to kidnap me when I was riding my bike alone, I hope that I never see you again. I am thankful for my mom for teaching me about stranger danger and about kidnapping at a very young age. If I never knew about that kind of stuff, then I probably wouldn't be here to tell this story. So do exactly what my mother did. Teach your kids, siblings, and all young kids about kidnapping and the dangers of strangers, because you never know what can happen to them. My grandmother, who happens to be my great aunt, but is like a grandmother, was kidnapped when she was 8 years old. It's a long story, but here it goes. She was sent out to go babysit her 6-year-old cousin at the theater. Yeah, an 8-year-old babysitting a 6-year-old. Very good idea, right? They started watching the Sunday cartoons. The plan was that they would meet their parents outside of the theater when the movie had finished. About an hour or so into the showing, a man had come into the theater, walked straight to her row. He grabbed her by the wrist, where she was wearing a locket, told her that it was time to go. She got up with him, and they started walking out of the theater. About 50 or 60 years ago, roughly the time that this had happened, they used to have attendants at the doors of the movie theater. When walking by the attendant, there just happened to be a manager standing there. She was afraid he would hurt her if she said anything, but she decided to take a chance anyways. Walking by the two men, she said, "Where are we going? You're not my father." He squeezed her locket and ran, pulling her aside. The two men had gave chase. He made it to the parking lot when she started to fight back. She stopped running and was trying to pull her arm off. The man, now realizing that he had no chance with her, had thrown her into the gutter, jumped into his car, and then he sped off, but not before someone was able to write down the license plate number. When she was questioned by the police, she wasn't really able to tell them much about it. She gave his description, which she says was the closest person that she can describe to me as looking slightly like George Costanza, and told me that she remembered he was wearing a green tie and had an accent. The police, having processed the license plate by now, decided to pay him a visit. They went to his house, and the door was answered by a boy of probably 11 years old. The police walked in, found a man fitting the exact description. He denied everything until they searched his closet. Bald on the floor was the same green tie that my grandmother had described to them. They took him in. He confessed to everything. This guy had a family, 2 kids and a wife. He was a Russian immigrant to come work in a small Midwest town's factory. What would he even have done with her if he had been successful on kidnapping her? My grandmother says that she never got the answer to that. After she successfully chose him in a lineup, her family was told that this wasn't his first kidnapping attempt, or his second, or even his 5th. It was his 11th attempt. His first started out with a girl of about 18 years old. Then every time that he failed, he went younger and younger until he reached my 8-year-old grandmother. He was tried at court, and yet again was released after 6 months in prison. He went on to kidnap 2 more girls after my grandmother. When telling us the story, she showed us the scar of where he clenched down on her locket. When I was about 13, my girlfriend and I were walking home from the library during summer break. We both had a few books and a beautiful day in northern New Jersey, so we were very happy. We reached the crossroads where she turned to go a few more blocks to her house, and then I would go the opposite direction, 3 blocks to my home. As we were standing on the corner, just talking before we would have to part ways, a 60s-style red car had pulled up at the corner. A very attractive young blonde man in his 20s asked if we knew the location of Church Street. Where we were standing at the corner, you could clearly tell Church Street was about 20 feet on the other side of the main road, where we had all stopped, so this question was really odd. Furthermore, Church Street was only 1 block long, was one way, and only had a large church, and approximately 4 houses on it. What would this young guy in the cherry red car need on Church Street anyways? My girlfriend and I just pointed to Church Street and said that it's right there. The gentleman then introduced himself, and then he tried to initiate a conversation. He was articulate, attractive, and charming. Why was he talking to us? He made jokes, asked us about what we were doing, did we know where to get a soda, things like that. He told me that I had beautiful hair, long wavy auburn hair, and that he was a hairstylist. He said that he would like to cut my hair for free and would like to use me in a modeling show. He asked me to come take some paperwork so that he could share some information. Even though my hair got a lot of comments, I certainly was not model material. That was even more weird to me. He kept on talking, trying to be over-friendly, almost, and it just kept becoming more creepy. He offered to buy us sodas and drive us home since it was very hot outside. After saying no many times in many different ways and trying not to give him any real information about us, he finally drove slowly down Church Street. My girlfriend began to run home her way, and I wanted to get to my house as soon as possible. I remember thinking that if he went around the block, that he could come up on me again, alone. So I made the decision to take a slight detour and then go down Church Street. It was very risky, since it was a very sparse street. Yet I figured at least he would not really turn around on the way. And if he did, I would see him coming. I cut through the church complex. I made it home, where I had told my dad what had happened. The police came, took a report, and almost talked to my friend. They mentioned that a gentleman had attempted to speak with yet another girl on the other side of town a few days prior, who matched the car and physical description that we gave. I never found out any more information or heard anything else about it, but that did scare teen me for a very long time. I was 13 at the time, and I lived in a low-income, run-down area where sex work was an everyday thing. From as young as I can remember, I would regularly have random men ask me if I wanted to earn some pocket money. One evening I was walking back from my friend's house. A couple of streets away from my house, I saw a regular working girl that I always stopped to chat with. Note that I grew up on the same street, and the sex workers were familiar people to me, and I would always talk to them. Anyways, this night, as I had turned the corner after speaking to the lady, a car full of men and obvious sex workers had stopped, and two women had gotten out and walked towards me. I looked over to the car, noticed the men that had gotten out and were standing and watching. One of the girls had a glass bottle and smashed it on the wall. She held it up to me and told me to empty my pockets. When I refused, she started grabbing me and trying to pull me towards the car. The men were now opening up the back door for us. Then all of a sudden, the girl that I had stopped and spoke to appeared out of nowhere and grabbed me and then ran home with me. My dad took me to the police station. The officer told me this is usually how working girls end up on the game. If they had succeeded, I would have been taken somewhere and pumped full of drugs until I was hooked and repeatedly assaulted to break me in. I never saw the sex worker again, even though she was a regular by my street. I worry all the time about what had happened to her. I was around 10 or 11. I was molested regularly by a neighbor. This lasted over years, and it was not just one event. This neighbor had a country home that he had rented to his friends. One of his friends was also a pedo. The two of them had arranged that I would be taken up to the country house. The friend picked me up on a Sunday morning, drove me out there. I was excited to go because I had heard so much about this country home. I remember driving around with this guy, and the next memory that I had, I was waking up in a large camping trailer. At the base of the bed was a tripod, and to my right was the driver. Here is where I lose everyone. I get out of bed, and I'm disoriented. I get dressed, and I exit the trailer. I start to walk down the street. I knock on a random door at a random house. The person that answers the door is one of the elementary school teachers from my community. At that very same moment, the driver pulls up in front of the door and yells over to me that FD, the neighbor, was looking for me, and that I had to go back to go see him. I returned to the car, and the driver had taken me back to the home in the city. I feel that if I did not knock at that door, the outcome would have been different. The driver could not do anything, because now someone had seen him. Although I know of others who had been molested by the same neighbor, no one believes the story. And to this day, the neighbor's good name is protected. And I really can't figure out why.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.